Jai Shri Prabhupada ki. This is a very big garland. We do these programs very regularly when time permits at different devotees' houses. So nice to see the children here also. Children very often become very, They become restless when we speak too much. During kirtan, they become quite happy. But sometimes when we speak about Krishna, or when we speak about a nice story from Bhagavatam, then sometimes they become happy. What we did for the last 15 minutes is actually a very simple spiritual activity. And it is not just found in our Vedic culture, it is actually found in all the cultures. The essence of our spiritual life, wherever we are, comes down to this point about chanting the holy names of Lord. And you'll find that wherever names of the Lord are chanted, in whatever faith we may be, you'll find that every faith, whether it's been the Bible, whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavata Puran, you'll find that generally the simplest way to actually connect with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually through chanting His names. Chanting Krishna's names is not only confined to His names. Chanting His names is also about remembering His activities. The nature of God is very different from the nature of us because He is considered to be Satchit Ananda Vigraha. And Satchit Ananda Vigraha actually essentially means that with Krishna, everything is absolute. So if you call Krishna's name, it is as powerful as seeing His form. There's no difference. If you called your husband's name and he's traveling somewhere in the world, he will not appear in front of you. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not good, depending on how you are. But generally speaking, if you call someone's name, they don't appear before you because their name is different from their form. So in Krishna's case, in God's case, it's very different. When you chant His name, our sastras tell us that His name and His form are not different. So the effect of calling for His name is the same as seeing His form. So if you see the deity of Krishna, like right now we have the deity of Krishna. We don't call them idols, like the way the Western translation is. We always use the word murti. Why? Because when we use the term murti, it means that God is not different from His form. But if you go to Trafalgar Square, for example, in London, then you will see an idol of Winston Churchill. It's very different from the murti of Krishna in the temple. The murti of Krishna in the temple is as good as Krishna. That's why we wake Him up in the morning, we give Him abhishek, we offer whatever we eat, we offer it to Krishna before we take. So we don't eat whatever we want, we eat whatever Krishna wants. So our whole life becomes centered around Krishna. Otherwise, what happens in material life is that we center our lives around our families, our societies, and our friends, which is fine, except that we don't realize that, like everything else in life, all these things become temporary. And after a while, when our happiness is attached to that one person, or that one event, or that one job, or that one house, when you take that away from the equation, then we become very disappointed, or we become frustrated. That's why so many relationships in the world eventually disintegrate. It's not the fault of the relationships, it's the nature of the world. It is nicely stated in Srimad Bhagavatam by Vyas Bhagwan that the nature of the world is bhautikanam cha bhavanam. In other words, anything that appears into this world, by nature, it must deteriorate. No matter how you try, it must leave. It will stay for a while, but it must go. That's why nobody says, I'm 21 years young. Even a small child, if you ask him how old you are, he will say, I'm 2 years old. Because the fact of the matter, whether we admit it or not, is the moment we are born, we're already dying. So death is not inauspicious, birth is not auspicious. Neither is neither. But the important thing in life is, what is the goal of our life? See, Anjali Mataji and Aditya Prabhu have decided to use a Saturday afternoon to spend some time trying to remember Krishna. And by doing that, for the next 1 hour, Whether or not we believe in him or we don't believe in him, you will realize one thing, that you will leave this house in a very calm and composed state. Of course, if you didn't have prasadam, you'll be agitated, but she will have prasadam for you, so that's fine. But spiritual vibrations are very different from material vibrations. If we all came here for a social function and there was no Krishna in the center, no chanting, there was no bhagavatam, then the atmosphere is very different. It's full of what we call either rajasic or tamasic. There are three modes of material nature the Gita speaks about. It's sattvic, there's rajasic and tamasic. That's found in the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And depending on the modes of material nature that we are in, we are either very disturbed or we are very peaceful. That's why you find that when we are very sattvic in nature, we are closer to Krishna. And sattvic means our minds are becoming more peaceful. And that is why when we chant Krishna's names, you'll find that your minds become peaceful. Whether you know it or you don't realize it, or whether you believe it or not, it actually works. It actually works. Sometimes people don't know why, but that's the beauty of spiritual life. Spiritual life in Bhagavatam is considered to be Gambhir. In Sanskrit, Gambhir means subtle. It means subtle. Its effect on us is not immediate. But if you keep chanting and chanting and chanting, you'll find that your consciousness slowly changes. But the beauty of it is, you can test it. That's why when we talk about bhakti, we don't talk about it in terms of sentiment. Sometimes many people accuse devotees of being sentimental. They say that we live in a very factual world, but this devotional process is not very factual, it's very sentimental. But actually, when you read the Gita and you read the Bhagavatam and you read the scriptures, you find that the logic that is given in our sastras is actually very powerful. The only problem is our minds are not open to accepting it. There's a saying, in India, that the nature of the mind must be that it should be open. If the mind is not open, then it is like a parachute. The only way a parachute works is when it opens. Otherwise, there's no point keeping a parachute. In the same way, when you have a mind, the mind must be open. If you cannot open up your mind to explore and understand the nature of the world around you, then it becomes very difficult for us to become peaceful. Sometimes we try so hard to make material adjustments in this world. But Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita tells us, no matter how much material adjustments you make, you cannot escape 4 stations of life: birth, death, old age and disease. No one can make any adjustments for these 4. Those who are born must be born. And those who are born, they must leave. So no matter how much we want to negotiate with Yamaraj, the time, when it comes for the time to leave, that's the time to leave. You have met people who look like they're going to die, but they survive much longer than, other people whom you think will not survive or will survive longer, because their time is not up. Then Bhagavad Gita also tells us that we have old age and disease. We are relatively young, so we're all right. But the moment the white hairs come and the teeth gets loose and the skin sags, and you find walking up the stairs is a bit difficult as compared to 4 years ago, 10 years ago, old age has caught up. You all have parents. You know how they were 10 years ago, and you know how they are 10 years later. It's becoming more and more difficult for them to do the things that they used to do. So old age is also inevitable. And no matter how many adjustments we make also, nobody's going to be free of disease. That will always be there, right? In fact, the symptom of life, as we say it, is actually that you have disease. A dead man has no disease, but then he's dead. So disease is part of life. So no matter how much adjustments we have made in the history of mankind, it's very difficult to come out of these 4 pillars of our lives. And the big question that we ask is, why do we chant Krishna's names? Why do we take up spiritual life? Because we are not just matter. This body is matter. It is sharir. It will die. Eventually leave us. When someone leaves this world, we never keep that person's body. In fact, we draw a distinction subtly between the body and the person. We never keep, no society in the world will ever keep anybody's body. It's just considered blasphemous. So we understand then that we are not this sharir. We are something more. And that is why we have to understand our nature. Our nature is inherently spiritual. It is not material. And the more we understand that, the more we move away from matter and the more we move to spirit, that's when we will find the true purpose of life. Does it mean then that we have to discard our material duties? Because that's what everyone tends to ask. Oh Prabhu, if you get into spiritual life, then I have to forego so many things. Do I have to stop this or do I have to stop that? Actually, when you take up spiritual life, you will find that it doesn't interfere with material life. In fact, you will find that when you take up spiritual life and you put Krishna in the center, then your work continues. We never say that sadhus must become unfriendly or that they should become unloving to their children and their families. It doesn't mean that when we take up devotional life, the husbands will leave the wife and take sannyas. No. In fact, Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita wanted to do so. Right? He wanted to leave. In the first chapter, he gave so many favorable arguments why he should leave and why he should go to the cave and become sadhu. But Krishna told him that is not bhakti. Bhakti means that if you have a designated duty that you have to perform, and that we call as dharma, then that is your dharma. So you all have dharmas. At the moment, your dharma is to be mothers, is to be fathers. Your dharmas at work are all set. But Bhagavatam insists, Savai pumsam paro dharmo, yathor bhakti radoksaje, ahaituki apratihata, yatma suprasidati. In the first canto, second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is actually a very beautiful Puran, because it speaks all on the devotees of Krishna and everything about Krishna. Very nicely it is stated that we may have so many different dharmas, we may have so many different occupations, but we have one supreme occupation. And that occupation is Yathor Bhaktir Adoksaje. It is to render devotional service and re-establish our relationship with the Supreme Creator, Krishna. That is the purpose of life. So when the goal of life is established, then the mind is not disturbed. It's a very important point. Disturbance of the mind is very often due to a lack of an ultimate goal. One of the great acharyas who commented on Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, he gave a nice commentary on the second chapter, 66th verse. And in the purport, it is very nicely stated that disturbance of mind is due to want of an ultimate goal. When you don't, even in the material world, when you're not clear about what you want to do, you find people who are not clear about what they want to do, they're very disturbed. Sometimes they're here, sometimes they're there. The nature of the mind is chanchal, isn't it? That's what Bhagavad Gita tells us. So when you are not sure what you have to do in life, then you become chanchal. But if you know your goal of life, then it becomes very easy. So our goal of life is ultimately not to keep coming back into this world. Because we've done that so many times. We've had so many husbands in our past lives. We had so many wives in our past lives. We had hundreds of children in our past life. Yet in this life we say, you are the only one. And last life you said that to someone else also. And for the life of you, you can't remember who that person was. Sometimes it's good, my Guru Maharaj used to say, Devaki, it's very good that we can't remember our past life because one life is enough. And sometimes one wife or one husband is enough. So how to remember so many past lives and so many past connections? It becomes mind-boggling. So that's why Bhagavatam says that it's very important to have a sense of perspective. In the 6th canto, there was a very famous king known as Chitraketu Maharaj. And he wanted a child so badly. So many queens he had, but none of them could give him child. Finally, one rishi came. His name was Angira. And when he came to the kingdom, he saw that the king was so morose. So he asked the king, why are you morose? Are you morose because you don't know the goal of life? But instead of understanding what the sage was saying, he was so materially attached to something which he thought would bring him happiness. And so he said, my dear sage, I don't have a child. If I had a child, I would be perfectly happy. This is the nature of the material world. We actually believe that when we invest in something which is material, it will bring us happiness. It will, but that happiness will be temporary. And temporary happiness means very often disappointment. Isn't it true? So this is the nature of the world. And that's why Chitraketu Maharaj then said that my dear king, he told the sage Angira, please give me a child. Somehow, please find a way in which I can have a child. So Angira had actually come to see Chitraketu Maharaj for a different reason. He had come to see him because he was in trouble in the material world and he wanted to give him spiritual knowledge. He wanted to make him understand that our happiness is not dependent on an external factor. Very often you find that in material world, we become happy because we think that someone will make us happy. And very often when we invest so much of hope and happiness in that person, inevitably the person becomes the person who disappoints you. So it's very important for us to realize that in Bhagavatam, Chitraketu Maharaj thought that by having a son, he would become very peaceful. So Angira Rishi then told him, never mind, since you want a son so much, I give you the benediction that you will have a son. But your son will be a source of happiness and a source of distress. Now at that point of time, Chitraketu Maharaj thought, wait a minute, all children are like that, isn't it? You know, all children, one moment they make us so happy. Wait till they grow up to their teenagers' life, you know, and then you realize, oh, okay, they're very different from when they were 5 or 6 years old. So children are always sources of ups and downs for us. So he thought, what's the big deal? And so what did he do? He said, all right, give me the child. And so in due course of time, one of his wives bore him a child. But because only that wife bore him the child, Chitraketu Maharaj became very attached to her. And the other queens became very envious. And in the middle of the night, the queens hatched a plot to poison the child. And they killed the child. In the morning, the queen mother saw that the child was dead. And it was too much for her. Chitraketu Maharaj walked into the palace room and saw that the child, who was supposed to be the source of his greatest happiness, now became the source of his greatest sorrow. Why? Because there was no attachment to Krishna. Krishna was completely absent. There was only attachment ultimately to matter. We don't realize that it is not Krishna's fault that things leave us. It is the nature of the world. We ourselves are not permanent. You can promise everyone, I'll be there for you forever, but it's a myth. You will have to leave. At some point or another, our accounts have to close. But Chitraketu Maharaj did not realize that. So he thought that now is the end of my life. And so the whole kingdom was plunged into grief. Now Angira Rishi came back again, but this time he came back with Narada Muni. And Narada Muni is a great, great devotee of Krishna. And when they both came back, they came to console the king. When we go to console someone who has lost something, we tend to tell them things, we offer words of comfort, and we tell them, don't worry, what to do, it's happened, but we are all there for you. But that's a myth, because we also cannot be there for them. We are also caught. We are also caught. So we cannot be there actually. We want to, but we can't. We want to be there for our children out of so much love because we are parents. But when our children fall sick, you know, only you know as parents how helpless sometimes we feel. Sometimes we want to help our children through a difficult time in school, for example. But we realize sometimes that our children have to fight their own battles. And even if we try to help them, we can only pray for them. And as they grow up, right, we realize how little control we have over them. When they are daughters and they have to leave our houses and they go to somebody else's houses, we pray that there they will be taken care of in the same way they were treated like princes and queens in our house. But we have no say over that also. Sometimes, in those days, arranged marriages were common, but today they're becoming more and more rare. If your son or daughter brings a girl back and says, I want to marry him or want to marry a boy, you can say something, but generally speaking, their minds are made up. And all you can do is pray for them. So actually, there is very little control that we have. But because we don't realize that, we think we can actually offer some help to others. So Narada Muni came not to offer words of comfort. Very important. Sadhu by nature doesn't come to give you material comfort. Sadhu comes to give you spiritual reality. And spiritual reality sometimes is not very palatable. If someone is very attached to something and you tell them it will leave them, they don't like you very much. But that is the nature of sadhus. Spiritual life is not meant to garner popularity votes. It's meant to tell you the truth. And truth is more important. So then Angira Rishi and Narada Muni then told Chitraketu Maharaj, why are you crying, Chitraketu? He said, my son is gone. Narada Muni said, would you like your son to come back? And Chitraketu said, you are so powerful. If he comes back, it will be the best thing for me. So then Narada Muni looked at the child and said, oh child, The living entity within you has left the body. That eternal soul that has been in this body is no longer here. Now I summon you, O spirit soul who was in this body. Please come back to this body and awaken. And the moment Narada Muni said that, the child woke up from the dead. But when it woke up, Chitraketu Maharaj was very happy. Mother was very happy. But the child asked one question to Narada Muni. Narada looked at the child and said, "My dear child, your father has called for you and he's here." And the child looked at Narada Muni and said, "My dear Narada ji, you have called me back into this body. But which father are you referring to? In which life are you referring to? Which mother are you referring to? And in which life you're referring to?" And that hit Chitraketu's heart in the right way. It woke him up. He thought he was the father. But then he realized he was one of the many fathers. And that made him come to the ground, And then he woke up from this illusion. And he said, "My dear Narada, by bringing this child back now, you have very subtly informed me of a very important truth. And the truth is, I am looking for happiness in all the wrong places. And ultimately, the happiness will come when I establish my connection with that which will be permanent." Very important. In Bhagavatam 6th canto, the Devatas, they sing a nice prayer to Krishna. Avesmitam tam paripurna kamam svaneva labena samam prashantam vinobhasapati aparam hi bhalishaha swalangulena atititarti sindhum. It's a beautiful verse. And there, the Devatas pray to Krishna. They say, "Krishna, you have a beautiful quality that we should learn. Avismitam tam paripurna kamam." Paripurna kamam means, Krishna, by nature, you are fully satisfied. This is the nature of Krishna. If you read all Krishna Leelas, you'll find that the reason why everyone who was always with Krishna were happy was because Krishna by nature is fully satisfied in himself. He's complete. He's complete. And we cannot claim to be complete because we have so many defects. How can we even claim to be Krishna? Some people say, Krishna just played with young girls. And in that way, they don't understand the transcendental nature of Krishna. But the Acharyas say, if you think that you have the adhikar to behave like Krishna, then why don't you carry Govardhan Hill on your left finger, tiny finger? Because if you can do that, then you have the right to perform the activities that he performed. So Krishna is very powerful. But we don't understand his activities because he's transcendental. He's beyond material world. But the nature of Krishna, why when we chant Krishna's names just now, we were very peaceful and satisfied, is because his nature is he's self-satisfied. He's very peaceful. Krishna is not dependent on anyone for him to become happy. Even when the gopis were with Krishna, they were the greatest of the devotees. But at any point of time when the gopis thought that I only have Krishna, Krishna disappeared from their vision. Why? Because Krishna is completely independent. He is known as Swarat. So when we connect to someone who's fully self-satisfied, we also become fully self-satisfied. Simple example is given in the lights and the fans. The fan and the light looks very nice. In this house, they look very nice. But if they were not connected to the main powerhouse, then they would not be able to fulfill their most basic function of either giving us wind or giving us light. So we may look very complete, but if we are not connected to the supreme powerhouse known as Krishna, then we are not complete. It's a very important point we should remember. So Chitraketu Maharaj woke up from his illusion. And Bhagavatam tells us he then understood his purpose of life. And then he took the blessings of Narada Muni and he went to complete his life in such a way that he retired from all kingly life and he concentrated on Krishna. So this is a very important point. And why I bring this up is because we have just chanted Krishna's names. So Krishna's names, his deity form, his activities that we discuss now, they're all non-different. They're absolute. That is the meaning of Sat. The other quality of Krishna is he's Chit. Chit means he's cognizant. You know, you and I are cognizant. That's why we are human beings. We are aware, we are conscious. But I am conscious of my body. And even though I try to be a nice person and I feel bad for you, or I try to reach out to you, I can never really know what's happening in your heart. Each one of us, we only know ourselves. We can never really know 100% the other person's heart. But because Krishna is Paramatma and he's in the heart of all living entities, so Krishna knows the heart of every living entity. And that's why Krishna can perform in one activity so many different achievements and aims. He's very, very expert in doing that. A simple example is Mahabharata. When Krishna decided that the Pandavas, who were the upholders of Sanatana Dharma, who were the pure devotees of the Lord, when he decided that they will win the war, Krishna told Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita 11:33, Mayai vaite nihata purva evam nimitta matra bhavya savya sachi. Very important point. He told Arjuna in the 11th chapter, Arjuna, I've got news for you. The news is, whoever who is supposed to be vanquished on this battlefield, Mayai vaite nihata purva evam, by my potency they have already been vanquished. So then the question would be, what job is there for Arjuna to do? If Krishna has already decided who will leave this battlefield alive and who will not, then what is the purpose of Arjuna? And then he explained to Arjuna, you become nimitta matra, become an instrument in my hands. And he used the word savyasachi. Sometimes Krishna is transcendently sarcastic. We are also sarcastic sometimes with each other, but everything comes from Krishna. So Krishna's transcendental sarcasm is there because he's telling Arjuna, you are savyasachi. Savyasachi means one who is an expert wielder of the bow and arrow. You're very expert, Arjuna, but I've got news for you. Your bows and arrows have no effect until I sanction them. You can shoot all the arrows you want, but until I decide someone will die or someone will live, the arrows will have no effect. So that's what he was trying to remind us as devotees. The biggest single obstacle between us and Krishna is our pride. The pride that we don't need to establish a relationship with our Father. We are doing well. When a son decides, I don't need my father's business, I'll start my own business. Even if his business is failing, because of pride, he will never go back to Father. He will say, no, I'm doing all right. Maybe one day after everything has gone and his pride has gone, he will go back to the Father. We are like that. We have decided that we don't need God. And therefore we think that our life is fine. I've got my car, I've got my CPF, I've got my bank, I've got my children. What can go wrong? Everything can go wrong. Everything can go wrong. And you don't need things to go wrong for us to connect with our Father. It's the most natural relationship in the world. And whenever anyone is disturbed, we always tell them from the Gita and from the Bhagavatam, you just chant Krishna's names. Very simple. Krishna's names are so simple, but they are non-different from Krishna. That is why in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 4th canto, it is nicely stated the effect of Krishna Katha. And I want you to test it right now as we have spoken for the last 45 minutes. In the Bhagavatam it is stated, Yatra idyante katham ristas, Trishnaya prasammo yataha, Nirvaira sarva bhuteshu, Notvega yatra kaschana. So, Bhagavatam tells us, whenever members of an audience come together, yatra idyante, when they come together, and what do? They discuss about Krishna, or they hear about Krishna. Yatra idyante katham ristas. This katha is considered amrit. That's why it's known as kathamritam. When we discuss somebody else's katha, you find it becomes what we call gossip. So if you go for a social function and you look at each other, and you come back very disturbed, because either someone spoke to you nicely or somebody ignored you, or they said hello to the person next to you and they never said hello to you, and that disturbs you. Sometimes people wear clothes which are so, elaborate, they look like walking, sari shops or jewelry shops, and then they flaunt it. And you go for social functions and sometimes you feel out of place, sometimes your esteem is low. You talk about anything under the sun except Krishna, but ultimately when you come back, you find that you have more things which are disturbing you or agitating you than actually making you peaceful. But when you come to hear Krishna Katha, nobody is looking at anyone. At this moment, you're only looking at Krishna or you are seeing this. Nothing else. And no one is bothered how anyone is dressed. If you are bothered how each one is dressed, then you've come to the wrong place. Because here, it's all about Krishna. It's not about us. So, yatra idyante katham ristas. In the presence of audience who want to hear Krishna, three things happen. Trishnayaha prasammo yataha. Bhagavatam says, whatever dissatisfaction that we have in our heart, whatever, Trishnaya means agitation, not happy. That kind of feeling of dissatisfaction, prasammo yataha, it becomes peaceful. We are not agitated. Right now in this house, we are very peaceful. Don't worry about the children. Children by nature will have to make noise. That's their nature. But they are very peaceful because they are together. So we are very peaceful. Why? Because we are hearing Krishna. So, Trishnayaha prasammo yataha. That's the first effect. The second effect is very nice. Nirvaira sarvabhuteshu. Whatever envy that we have in our hearts, when we sit down to hear Krishna, the envy doesn't surface. Otherwise, if you go for any other function or hear anything else, we become naturally envious of each other. We compare with each other. And because we think I have something better than he or she, then we become agitated. So there is no envy when we come to hear Krishna either. And the last thing that's really nice, na udvega yatra kaschana. There is no fear in our hearts when we want to come to hear Krishna. Sometimes we say, I'm not fearful, I'm very brave. But the cousin of fear is more common than fear. It's called anxiety. We may not be very fearful, but we are definitely anxious. Every day. Have you been in situations where you think, I've got a really tough week and I have a deadline? And at that point, the fear factor and anxiety is very high. And you tell yourself, when Friday comes, I will be very peaceful. My life will become very normal. Friday comes, the project is over. Before you leave your workplace, some other anxiety has started to come. And it's going to build through the weekend. You think weekend are relaxed. We're all here, long weekend, even better. We don't have to go back so fast. But come Monday night and see how anxiety, the cousin of fear, starts pricking your mind, telling you tomorrow I've got that, I've got this, I've got that, I've got this. That's life. But when you chant Krishna's names, anxiety, fear, envy, they're all outside the door. They don't come inside. Because Krishna is transcendental. So the verse I just quoted to you, Avesmitam tam paripurna kamam swaneva labena samam prashantam. So if you are connected to Krishna, you become samaha. Samaha means you're equal in all circumstances, you're equipoised in all circumstances. Difficult times, we are with Krishna. Good times, we are also with Krishna. Otherwise, normally what happens is, good times we forget Krishna. When we are really desperate, suddenly overnight we become great devotees. But the great devotees in Bhagavatam are never like that. Kunti Mata and the Pandavas suffered like anything. Never once did they blame Krishna. In fact, Kunti Mata says in Bhagavatam, Vipadaha Santutsa Saswat Tatra Tatra Jagat Guru. She tells to Krishna in 1.8.25 of Srimad Bhagavatam that Krishna, I pray that more and more calamities should come, because when calamities come, I remember you. And when I remember you and when I see you, there will be no more repeated birth and death. We come out of samsara chakra. So the devotees of the Lord never look at challenges in a negative way. And that's the most practical point of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness gives you the ability to change your lenses, gives you the ability to see the world in a different way. Challenges for devotees are not challenges. They are opportunities to remember Krishna. Very important. Another great devotee from Bhagavatam known as Vritrasur, he chants very nicely. Aham hare tava padai kamula dasa nudaso bhavitasmi bhuyaha manasmareta supater gunamste granitava karma karotu kayaha nanaka prishtam nachaparameshtam na sarvabhaumam narasadhipatyam na yoga siddhi rapunarbhavam va samanjasatva virahaya kangshe. Krishna's name in Bhagavatam is known as Samanjas. S-A-M-A-N-J-A-S-A. It's a very unique name of Krishna. But if you read the meaning of it is nice. Samanjas means source of opportunities. So the devotee of the Lord sees a difficulty as an opportunity. To do what? to remember Krishna. And that's very important in life. So, you can either choose to be negative about the material world that you are living in, or you can be like the great devotees of the Lord. Parikshit Maharaj was cursed to die, isn't it? In 7 days. But instead of counter-cursing, instead of filing a lawsuit against Shringi Brahmana, instead of making so much noise and cursing Krishna, how can you do this to me? He didn't waste time. The moment he heard he had 7 days to live, he thought, Krishna is very kind. Who is given 7 days notice before they die? Very few people. None of us, most of us will not get 7 days notice. Yamaraj doesn't send you an email and say, in 7 days I'm coming. He doesn't do that. If he did that, it's good because you have time. But he doesn't do that. So Parikshit Maharaj thought, Krishna is so kind. He's given me 7 days. How do I use that 7 days? So he sat down with Shukadev Goswami and he heard Bhagavatam for 7 days. And at the end of 7 days, he completely detached himself from this material world. And he went back to Godhead. So, never be discouraged by difficulties in your life. It's a very important point to remember. Bhagavatam tells us difficulties are there. They won't go. Sometimes people say, Prabhu, if I chant Krishna's names, the difficulties will go. Well, I've got news for you. When you chant Krishna's names, the difficulties don't go. But your ability to handle them and your attitude, that becomes better. Now, do you want to give a farmer who says his crops are gone, do you want to give him just crops for this year? Or do you want to give him the skills so that he's able to rear animals and raise crops in the right way for many years to come? Which one is better? The second one is better. So that's why Krishna consciousness may take time, but ultimately it's more powerful. We are not here for the quick fix, because there's no quick fix in this material world. There's no quick fix. And that's why this point I wanted to bring up. That's why we chant Krishna's names. Krishna Katha, when we hear about Krishna, when we speak about Krishna, you will find that our hearts become very peaceful. So then you may say, what do I do after this? We have a program, everybody goes back. Do I continue with my life? The main difference is, if we really value a change of life, then we have to change the way we live our lives. That's the only difference. I go to work, Umang Prabhu goes to work, Dipanshu Prabhu goes to work, Yamraj Prabhu goes to work. We all work. But we chant Krishna's names, we do our sadhana, we make sure that we have our first appointment of the day with Krishna. Generally, our first appointment of the day is with the bathroom. And then after that, it's with all the other things in the world. And then when we have time, we'll keep it for Krishna. If you really valued someone, you put them at the start of the day. You won't say, look, I love you very much, but I can only talk to you after I've finished everything. I don't think he will like you very much. But if you tell someone whom you value that I want to talk to you because you're the most important person and it has to be done first thing in the day, then that's what we should do. That's why devotees start the day by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's it. It's a very simple mantra to chant. But all we have to do is chant it with our hearts. Very important. When the children go for exams and whenever they are faced with difficulties, the parents teach them nice shlokas from Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. And we tell them, that you always try to remember Krishna. So before they start anything, they always chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. That's the power of the name. The name is so powerful. In Bhagavatam, there's a nice point that's stated that even if there is fire, nature of fire is to burn, isn't it? Fire is so powerful that you cannot deny its nature. If a child touches fire, fire will not say, oh, you're a child, I will not burn you. No. Whether you know the nature of fire or you don't know the nature of fire, fire will act. And that is the power of Krishna Katha and Krishna Nam. Whether we know the effect of chanting Krishna's names, or we deny the effect of chanting Krishna's names, or we advance favorable arguments against the effect of chanting Krishna's names. Krishna's names are so powerful, they work anyway. Another example I can give you is the taxman in any government countries, any countries. You can say, I don't want to pay the tax because I don't believe in this government. But when the tax notice comes and you don't pay, whether you like it or not, you will have to pay your taxes. That's how it is. So Krishna's name is so powerful, no point denying it. We should embrace it. That's it. It's so simple. Sometimes we go to houses and we request devotees, please chant Krishna's names. At the end, now we're going to chant kirtan, and we say, please chant Krishna's names. It doesn't cost you. It's free. No one has taxed it. You don't have to do anything. You just have to open your mouth and you chant Krishna's names. But sometimes, Ravana could never chant Ram's names very nicely. Hiranyakashipu did not like to say Vishnu at all. So Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam tells us that when we have a nature which is envious, it's very difficult to chant the names of the Lord. Very difficult. But Yamaraj, the superintendent of death in the 6th canto, has said that you should bring 4 kinds of persons to me. And the first person that comes to Yamaraj is the person who in his lifetime just refuses to even once chant the holy names of the Lord. And then Yamaraj says, bring me 4 persons. Don't bring me these 4 persons. He gives us another category. There are 4 persons, and these 4 persons should not be touched. And all these 4 persons have one thing in common. They are entirely devotees of the Lord. So we should live our life in such a way that before we start disclaiming the presence of God, test it. That's what we always ask devotees to do. If you say, well, I don't believe in it, have you tried it? Have you tested it? Chant it. Chant it for a week. If you find it doesn't work, discard it. If you find, wait a minute, it has some value to it, then don't let your pride come in the way of who you are and who your Creator is. Very important. I want to give you a short 2-3 minutes story from our Shastras about the power of the holy name and the simplicity of devotional service. In Dwarka, Rukmini Mata and Satyabhama were the principal queens, isn't it? Rukmini Mata her disposition was, she was very, very soft and very loving. Satyabhama was more Kshatriya-like. She was very powerful. So one day what happened is, on a Wednesday in Dwarka, Satyabhama would conduct herself in such a way that she would open up her whole palace and ask people, anything you want, you come and ask for me. So people came. And she would do this. She would have this big scale, and she would put items here and items there, and if they balanced off, it would be fine. Then she would give it away. Now, on that day, Narada Muni came. And Narada came, and Satyabhama was very happy. She said, Narada ji, what do you want? Today is Wednesday. I can give you anything you want. So Narada said, Mata, I only have one thing I want to ask you. You please give me that which you consider the most valuable in your life. Satyabhama's instant reaction was, I've got a lot of jewelry. Believe me, I've got a good collection. I'll go and take everything and I'll put it on the scale. And then all of a sudden, Narada said, no, I don't mean that. What is really most valuable to her? And then when Satyabhama realized, oh my God, he means Krishna. So does he want me to give Krishna today? Because I can give everything now and Krishna belongs to me. I'm his devotee. And she became very scared. She said, I can give you anything except Krishna. Krishna is too precious to me. But Narada said, you gave your word. You have to keep it. By the way, it's a Wednesday. You don't deny anyone on a Wednesday. So then she thought, I'll do one thing. I'll bring Krishna. I'll put him on one side of the scale. Then I'll put everything valuable that I have on that side. When the scale's equal, you take all of that and let me keep Krishna. So Narada thought, fair deal. Try. See if you can do it. So she went to call Krishna. Krishna is very kind. He's the supreme personality of Godhead. But sometimes he played the perfect part of a henpecked husband, especially when he came to Satyabhama. So Satyabhama said, Krishna, now you are needed in the palace. So Krishna thought, all right, she's calling, I better go. Then she brought out the scale and said, Krishna, sit on the scale. Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. But he's so kind to his devotees that when his devotees ask him to do things, out of love, he does it. You remember Damodar Leela in Vrindavan? Krishna was tied to a mortar by his mother for misbehaving. And yet, this is the same Krishna whom fear personified is fearful of. Whom all the demons are trying to kill, but they cannot kill. All the demons are trying to catch, but they cannot catch. And yet, he allowed his mother Yashoda to catch him. So he allowed Satyabhama, put me on the scale. So Krishna very dutifully, like a good husband, sat down on the scale. Nothing to do, just wait. And Satyabhama then got all her maidservants, bring everything valuable and put it on there. And that's what they did. And the more she piled up, the more she looked at Krishna, and she realized Krishna hadn't moved an inch from the ground. And Satyabhama exhausted every single piece of item in her palace. But the truth is, no material item can be valuable or equal to in the weight and value of Krishna. Isn't that a very important message for us? We can have so many things in this world, but they are all considered zeros. But if you have one in front of all the zeros, then the zeros have meaning. Then even if you have one and a zero, it's 10. But if you have 10 zeros with no one, it is still zero. So Satyabhama now became very anxious because she thought she's going to lose Krishna. She ran to Rukmini and she said, Rukmini, you have to help us. Satyabhama explained what happened. And Rukmini said, you should figure it out. But Satyabhama said, if I lose Krishna, just for your information, you also lose Krishna. Then Rukmini thought, okay, I better do something now. We're all going to lose Krishna, and that's not a good thing. So Rukmini entered. She saw the scale. She saw what was on the scale. She saw Krishna sitting there smiling and waiting. And she told Satyabhama, my dear sister, do you really think Krishna is worth all of this? Take them all off. And she said, I have a solution. She went outside to the garden of the courtyard. She bowed before Tulsi Maharani. And Tulsi Maharani is one of the greatest devotees of Krishna. Krishna is always pleased when we have Tulsi. She's just a leaf, but she's a great devotee because her entire life is dedicated to Krishna. So Rukmini Mata took Tulsi Devi, one piece, and after taking that one piece, she chanted Krishna's names. And she inscribed Krishna's name on Tulsi Maharani. And she put that on the scale. And the moment she put that leaf of Tulsi Maharani on the scale, Krishna went right up and Tulsi Maharani went right down. And Rukmini Mata took Tulsi, gave it to Narada and said, Narada ji, this is the equivalent of Krishna. And Narada became even more ecstatic because he said, today I have learned the great value of devotional service. The great value of devotional service is in the power of the devotee whom you take sadhu sangha from. It's in the power of the name of Krishna, which was written with the devotee. And it's the power of the chanting of Krishna's names. And all that is equal to value in Krishna. So you see, it's a very simple episode in Shastras, but it has such a deep meaning. So Krishna doesn't want opulence, or rather he doesn't want wealth. But if you give him a leaf, a flower, a fruit or water, but you offer it with love, and you offer it knowing that he is everything, all in all for you, that becomes more valuable than anything material. That is the key of why we are here. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So with that in mind, my humble request for the next few minutes is that we chant Krishna's names. When a child touches fire and he gets burned, he becomes confused because he doesn't know why fire burns him. But it acted anyway. When we chant Krishna's names and we don't know the value of Krishna's names, it will act, but not as powerful as when we appreciate Krishna's names. Isn't it true? When you appreciate someone, it becomes so much more deeper. Your love for them, your appreciation for them becomes much deeper. So now that we know how powerful Krishna is, my humble request to all of you is to chant Krishna's names. And after today, when we have finished the program, don't go back and forget about Krishna. Because if you do that, then this entire program is a ritual. And really, we are not interested in rituals. We do so many rituals and we don't know the meaning of rituals. And that's the reason why we stopped doing many things, because nobody taught us the significance of rituals. So let us not make these gatherings also something auspicious. There's a vast difference between spiritual and auspicious. What is auspicious in this material world is very often subjective, very subjective, very, very subjective. What is auspicious for one person is highly inauspicious for you. When you live in multiracial places, something you think is auspicious, the other party would say, no, this is not good in our side. So Krishna is not about auspiciousness. Don't create this material auspiciousness and make it into a ritual. We have to rise above it. Krishna is entirely spiritual. He's transcendental. You all know Akbar and Birbal, isn't it? You all should know. One time I remember Akbar was actually, Akbar is very powerful, very wise. He was away one day when Birbal was walking down the street with all his courtiers. As he passed by the road, he became intrigued by a shoemaker who was making the shoe. The more he looked, he forgot where he was walking. You know, sometimes you look at something, you look at your handphones and cross the road, you're in big trouble. It happens very often, right? So he was so engrossed in looking at the shoemaker that he bumped into a pillar he did not see and he injured his face. So all the courtiers came to Akbar and said, Maharaj, how can this be? How is it that you banged into this pillar? Who caused this to you? And Akbar said, actually no one caused this to me, but I was intrigued by the shoemaker and he distracted me. So the courtiers, to gain favor, they turned to Birbal and they said, they turned to Akbar and they said, my God, the reason why this has happened is because this shoemaker is very inauspicious. You looked at him and the next moment you hurt yourself. So he should not live in such a kingdom because you only want auspiciousness in the kingdom. So then the king thought, so what should I do with the shoemaker? I don't want inauspiciousness in my kingdom. So they said, put him on the hanging list. Tomorrow he should hang because he's creating inauspiciousness. Because you saw him, the next moment you got hurt. So the king wrote down his name also and he went to sleep. Next day, Birbal came back. Birbal looked at the list of people to be punished and he saw under the hanging list, which is normally reserved for the most heinous of crimes, he saw the shoemaker. So he said, Akbar, can I ask you a question? What did the shoemaker do to get hanged? And Akbar said, oh, he's very inauspicious. What do you mean by inauspicious? He said, I was walking, I saw him repairing the shoe, and before I knew it, I bumped into a pillar and hurt myself. So he's the cause of this pain. So then Birbal said, okay, I agree with you. I have just one more name to add to the list. Akbar said, tell me who? He said, your name. And Akbar said, why should I hang? I'm the king. And he said, no, I'm just thinking, if it is so inauspicious that you saw the shoemaker and you got hurt, how much inauspicious you must be to the shoemaker? Because while he was making the shoe and you walked by, because you got hurt, he has to die. So you are very inauspicious to the shoemaker and therefore you should die. So in this material world, nothing is really auspicious or inauspicious. Krishna Katha is transcendental to that. So don't chant because it will increase your bank balance. Don't chant because, oh, I have a problem and by chanting everything will go. No. Chant because it is your destiny and your aim of life to become part and parcel of Krishna, to re-establish your relationship with Krishna. When you do that, Krishna is paripurna kamam. And to end that verse, which I quoted the first two lines, the verse tells us, Krishna, you are perfect, complete, and you are always blissful. Those who are foolish, balishaha, what do they do in this world? Like a man who stands on a beach, he is with his pet dog. He throws a stick and the pet dog swims into the water. The man wants to cross this ocean and foolishly he thinks if he holds on to the tail of this dog, he can cross the ocean. But he doesn't realize that the dog can only swim for a while. And when the dog drowns, the man who holds the tail of the dog, he will also drown. So whose tail should we hold on to? Whose dhoti should we hold on to? We should hold on very carefully to the lotus feet of Krishna. Chitraketu Maharaj realized it when his son left him. All the great devotees, they realized it. They never saw tragedy in difficulty. They saw it as opportunity to remember Krishna. So please do that. Yes, Prabhu.
So I have one question.
Very good.
That spiritual connection or spiritual
Yes.
thing, then, how does a certain behavior becomes right or wrong?
Very good question.
If I am eating onion or garlic, how does that become wrong? Or if I am eating non-veg, how does that become wrong? Or if I am a teetotaler or if I drink wine, how does that become right or wrong?
Yes. I think the important thing is not what you drink or what you eat. I think the fundamental point is, are you doing what Krishna is pleased by? For example, if you have a father and you recognize the father, and the father tells you, I will be pleased if you do these things, then even if you like it or you don't like it, but you know that you want to please father, then you will do it. Sometimes in a relationship you love your wife, and even if you have differences with your wife about certain things, you do it because you go beyond being petty to understanding the fundamental principle of why you do something is to rise above what you think is right and wrong, but doing something for someone whom you love very deeply. So it is more relational, Prabhu, than it is its rules and regulations. So when we take up Krishna consciousness, we don't tell people that you must immediately stop eating meat. Because you can have many people who stop eating meat but who are not God conscious. That's also a problem. And Prabhupada, who started the Hare Krishna movement, he often said, being a vegetarian is not the goal of life. Even a pigeon is vegetarian. So what? The goal of life is to re-establish my relationship with my Creator. If we re-establish that relationship, then naturally we'll come to understand that other living creatures are also precious because they also have the spirit soul in them. And for a little moment of pleasure of our tongue, if we can save one little life, we can't change the world, but do we want to be part of the problem or do we want to be part of the solution? So it becomes very natural. If you ask many devotees who came to Krishna consciousness and changed their lives, they'll tell you they did it gradually. And they will also tell you they did it out of conviction, not out of a gun being put on the head. Because Krishna says that bhakti must be voluntary. You can't put a gun to someone's head and say you love me. And they will say, yeah, I love you, but that's because you have a gun on my head. Krishna doesn't want that. So, the most important principle is actually to get the basics right. The basic is to start including Krishna in everything we do. But how do you include him? If you want to include someone in your life, you need to get to know them. And the only way you get to know Krishna is when you read his instructions, which is found in Bhagavad Gita, and when you read his pastimes, which are found in Bhagavatam. So just like you want to know more about a TV, you read the manual. So if you want to know more about God, then read the scriptures. And when you start reading the scriptures, you'll find that there is a change of heart which is very natural. You'll find that the activities that you thought brought you happiness, you can see through them, and you realize that they are not much of value. So our purpose as devotees is not to condemn an alternate lifestyle. Our purpose of devotional service is to concentrate on our own garden. My garden should be in order. Otherwise, why would you be attracted to my garden? If my garden is in order and you say, hey, your garden is in order, I'd like to know how you keep it in order, then I can share something with you. Otherwise, what's the point of preaching? It has no value. So I hope that's helpful for you. So it's the essential that's important. And we should be very careful not to look down or look up upon people based on these things. These are supplements. But the main point is you start chanting. When we start chanting Krishna's names, everything that appears very illogical assumes a logic that we never saw before. And it's quite amazing. That's it, Prabhu. Thank you very much. It's a good question. So we chant Krishna's names. And if you're not chanting loud enough, then no prasadam for you. Okay, I'll tell Anjali Mataji to hold it back. So we have about 15 minutes. Let's chant. Chant as loudly as you can. But when we chant, what should we be asking Krishna? That's very important. Should we be asking Krishna, let the holiday extend a bit longer? Should we tell Krishna, I should do better in my exams? Should we tell Krishna, I want children? Should we tell Krishna, I want a good husband? Or my husband must become better? These things come and go. Better we ask Krishna, Krishna, our prayer should be that somehow or another, please keep me engaged in your transcendental loving service. And Aditya Prabhu, one of the best ways to cross over the oceans of doubts and the difficulties of reconciling certain things with certain things is actually to perform service for Krishna. It's the most practical thing that you can do. I find that many devotees came to Krishna and became devotees when they started performing simple services. And through that service, all knowledge becomes revealed. Because this knowledge is not just learned, it has also to be revealed. Very important point. So when devotees come to do simple things for Krishna, you find that our hearts become very happy. That's something you and I cannot talk about, but we can experience.